I was sent by a temp agency. I had no idea who I'd be working for or what would happen next. I only knew the pay was good. A week's excursion for $725 a night. More than enough to cover a couple of credit card bills and a decent chunk of next month's rent. For that price, I'd do almost anything. I only wish I'd known what I was getting myself into. Arriving at the address, I was quite surprised. It was a large structure at the end of a dirt road in the woods, 2 towns away. A large sign outside read Syntheticorp. It was a plain white 3-story building devoid of any identifying marks. Its appearance gave me no clue as to its purpose. Its location was even more baffling. Judging by the name alone, I should have assumed it was some kind of biotech company. I guess I had to clean up radioactive waste or something. For what they were paying me, I'd gladly risk my health. After entering the building and meeting the receptionist, I was directed to room 371 on the 2nd floor, where I was to wait for Al, my new boss. It was a standard office setup, albeit a bit fancier than usual. Red carpet, white walls, and no windows. Just 6 desks in 3 rows of 2, each with its own computer. At the far end of the room was a large wall covered in a one-way mirror, with a walkway with steps on either side. Inside was a single chair, a desk, and a landline phone. This was probably the office space for executives monitoring employee performance. Other than that, the room was unremarkable, unless you counted the trash can and the fern in the corner as interesting. An older gentleman opened the door to the room and came to shake my hand, introducing himself as Al. He seemed in a hurry, wasting no time in describing the task at hand. I was to remain in this very room from 8 p.m. until 6 a.m. the next morning, every night for a week. He left me his cell phone number and a laminated list of rules to follow. He told me he couldn't overstate the importance of following each one exactly as written. Once he was satisfied, I understood the gravity of the situation. He left me alone, closing the door behind him. That's it? Really? Just staying in a room for 10 hours a day? I had no idea why they were paying me over $5,000 to sit in a room, but I'd learned a while ago never to look a gift horse in the mouth. I simply sat in the observation room with a smile on my face and reviewed the list of rules. There were 10 of them, and all of them baffled me. 1. As soon as 8 p.m. arrives, lock the door and do not leave the room until 6 a.m. under any circumstances. Schedule your bathroom and meal times accordingly. There should be no food or drink in the room. 2. Do not use Hank's computer. It's closest to the exit. No one should ever touch it under any circumstances, not even Hank. 3. If the phone rings, answer it, but do not speak. No matter what the voice on the other end says, you must not answer. Hang up after 2 minutes. 4. Do not let the janitor in. We don't have one. 5. If someone else approaches the door, let them in, but ignore them. Do not respond under any circumstances. When they leave, close the door and lock it behind you. 6. If the trash can changes location, return it to the corner as soon as you notice. 7. If I come in, only let me in if I know the password. 8. At precisely 9:30 p.m., set different URLs on the home screen of each computer, except Hank's. Ignore what you see. Act as normal. 9. If you see Harvey, feed him one of the treats from Lisa's desk, the one opposite Hank's. 10. If there's an emergency, call me on my cell phone, but no later than 10:05 p.m. Below the last rule was another phrase, scrawled directly onto the laminating film and pen. No one lasted past the third night. Good luck. I was puzzled, wondering for a moment if Al was crazy, and if that was the reason no one had lasted until the end. Perhaps his quirks had been too much for previous candidates, and they'd backed out, fearing for their safety in the hands of his fragile mind. I wouldn't be so easily persuaded. Even if Al were crazy, I'd gladly take his money for what was a very simple job. Or so I thought. The first shift was terribly boring. Nothing remarkable happened. Certainly nothing you'd expect from Al's list. At 9:30 p.m., I even changed the URLs on the computers, if only to feel a little useful. The next night, however, was a little different. The second shift began as usual. I braced myself for another long night, making sure to eat and empty my bladder before locking myself in. At 9:25 p.m., just as I was about to switch the URLs again, I saw it. The trash can was sitting right at the top of the stairs leading to the observation room. I certainly hadn't put it there. I felt a small surge of adrenaline before I calmed down with a smile. The trash can, the list. It was all a joke at my expense. Al must be in the next room, eagerly awaiting the chance to see the look on my face. I ran out to the first floor office. No one was there. I walked to the exit and shook the handle. It was still locked. Confused and a little scared, I quickly picked up the trash can and carried it back to the corner of the room. I looked at my watch. 9:30 p.m. I started changing the URLs on all the computers, desperately hoping I'd imagined what had just happened. Walking around Hank's desk, I typed in the last website on computer number 6. I was about to pull away when a strange image appeared on the screen. It was a security camera feed from the room, the very room I was in. I found myself looking at a computer. I turned and looked up, but the camera was gone. Looking back at the screen, I saw something horrifying. I watched as a copy of myself emerged from the surveillance room. It came up behind me, grabbed a hard drive from one of the tables, and hit me in the back of the head. I quickly turned to protect myself. There was no one there. I turned back, and the screen changed, showing the website I'd logged into as usual. I rushed back to the surveillance room and sat down, more than a little exhausted. I considered leaving, but forced myself to continue. After all, I was okay. Al might not have been crazy, but he didn't seem like the type to wish me harm. Not that I knew him all that well, and yet I hadn't sustained any injuries. Yes, I doubted my sanity, but I wasn't physically injured. Whatever was going on here seemed harmless so far. Knock, knock. There was a loud knock. Having just lived through the most terrifying experience of my life, I nearly jumped out of my skin. Then a voice came from behind the door. "It's the janitor. I'm only here to clean. Can you open the door?" I remembered rule number 4 and didn't let him in. You did well not to let him in. You followed that rule. You're fine now. As long as you follow the rules, you'll be safe. It's that simple. You can make it to the end. Knock, knock. I jumped again. I really need to get in there and clean. Open the door. I took a deep breath and pushed my anxiety aside, successfully ignoring the janitor until he left. It was an accomplishment for me, and I actually felt pretty good. A challenge I'd handled better than anyone else. Although I was still tense with anticipation, the next few hours passed without incident. At one point, I even dozed off. This continued until 2:30, when I was faced with a new challenge. A colorful cat, covered in beautiful black and orange spots, jumped onto the desk in front of me. I was startled, but she seemed friendly, brushing her hand against my arm. I saw the name on her collar. Harvey. I knew what I had to do. I rummaged through Lisa's desk, found a jar of treats, and fed one to Harvey, to which he purred with delight. Then, to my surprise, he immediately darted to the door and darted through. My mouth gaped in awe. Once my initial confusion dissipated, it was replaced by the satisfaction of another small victory. As strange as it might sound, I was starting to enjoy this job. Ding, ding. It was a landline. Remembering the rules, I picked it up and held it to my ear, trying to keep track of the time. Hi, it's Al. I'm going to stop by soon to finish up a few small things. How are you doing? I remained silent. Hello? You know you can talk if it's me, right? I picked up the list of rules and looked them over again. There was nothing about Al's call. I didn't answer. That's no way to treat your employer. If you don't say anything, I'll have no choice but to fire you. Is that really what you want? I stood my ground. Only 20 seconds left. Great. I'll see you soon to take you off duty. I don't think you could even survive a second night. 2 minutes passed, and I hung up. Another hour passed, and I felt safe. Reflecting on the trials I'd faced so far, I was confused but determined. I wasn't going to let the room cloud my judgment. I was in control. Knock, knock. It's Lisa. May I come in? Even though I hesitated, I had to follow Rule 5. I opened the door, and a woman entered. You must be new. What do you think of this place? I returned to my desk in the observation room and sat down, trying my best to act casual. Lisa approached the glass, knowing I could see through it. You're not much of a talker, are you? Her eyes darted unnaturally, and her skin sagged slightly, as if it were falling away from her bones. I didn't respond. She said nothing else. Instead, she stared at the glass for a long time, long enough for me to feel truly uneasy. Then, walking in as if nothing had happened, she stopped next to me, raising her hand. I hoped she wouldn't notice that my breathing had become ragged and labored. Then she abruptly slammed her hand down on the table, making a thunderous bang. I almost winced, but kept my composure. After another 5 awkward minutes, she left. I ran to the door and locked it behind her. A few moments later, there was another knock. This time, it was a boy, claiming to be looking for his father. I let him in and sat back down. He tried to ask me for help many times, but I studiously ignored him, just as I had with Lisa. However, at some point, I made the mistake of meeting his gaze. For a moment, between blinks, his eyes turned pitch black, devoid of any color. Startled, I almost stepped back but managed to restrain myself. Like Lisa before him, the boy eventually left, and I quickly locked the door behind him, another rule fulfilled. Aside from the trash can moving a few more times, nothing else happened that night. Before I knew it, it was time to go home. I seriously considered ending it, and I may have even had a nightmare or two while I slept that day, but I was determined to continue, curious to see what challenges the room would throw at me next. Curiosity shouldn't have been enough to draw me back, but all rational thought eluded me. There was a pull to the room, beckoning me. I was compelled to return, unable to resist its call. Any excuse would have sufficed. So the next evening, I resumed my post. I started my shift with confidence. Up until that point, I had dealt with a whole host of absurdities and patiently awaited the next opportunity. A couple of hours passed without a hitch. No cat, no pictures on the computers, no phone calls, no trash can antics. Boredom was just beginning to set in when a loud knock on the door broke the silence. Knock, knock. Not a single voice was audible. I called out from the observation room. "Who's there?" I asked. There was a short pause. "It's me, Al." I took the list and reread rule number 7. "What's the password?" I heard him chuckle to himself. "I never gave a password." He was right. The password wasn't written down with the rule. It must have been him. I cautiously approached the door and opened it. Al was there to greet me with a smile. I sighed with relief. "Let me guess. Afraid of what comes knocking at night?" He laughed at my obvious nervousness. "You have no idea." He closed the door and started doing something on one of the computers. "Listen! Why didn't you write down the password?" I asked. He smiled again. "It's a trick. Anyone posing as me could have tried to come up with something that would identify them as someone other than me. You see?" "I see. Good idea." He returned to his work at the computer. I didn't want to disturb him, but I just needed to know. "By the way, what is this place? Why is all this happening here?" He turned to me. "It would be better if you didn't ask any questions, especially ones that are way above your pay grade." I wasn't happy with the answer I'd gotten, but I knew it was all I'd get from him. I let it sit there and then returned to the observation room, watching through the one-way glass. And then I realized something. The computer Al had used. It was Hank's computer. I double-checked the list to make sure. Yes, this was definitely Hank's desk, and no one was supposed to touch his computer. Didn't that apply to Al, too? I flipped the list over in case I found any more information, and then my heart sank. Printed in large, bold letters on the back of the laminated sheet was a text that read, "Password. Diner." Fuck! I grabbed the phone, reached for the scrap of paper with Al's number on it, and dialed it as fast as I could. It rang a few times, but he finally picked up. "Hello? Is everything okay there?" "Al, thank God, I made a mistake. I thought it was you. I let him in, and now he's on Hank's computer." He let out a long, disappointed sigh. I watched as Al's double turned away from the computer and then stood up. "Listen very carefully. Don't act suspicious under any circumstances. You'll be fine if he doesn't suspect anything. If you try to leave or call anyone else, it's all over. Understand?" "Yes, I understand." Al's double headed for the observation room. My heart was beating faster than ever before. "I'll be there soon. Just don't panic." He hung up. I held the phone to my ear as Al's double approached, pretending to talk to my wife. "I told you, honey, at 6 in the morning. That's when I finish. You don't need to wait for me. You're worrying too much. Please get some rest." Al's copy was now standing in the room next to me, looking at me. I clutched the phone to my chest and looked at him again. "Everything okay?" I asked. He continued to stare for several long seconds. "Could you help me with something on the computer?" I wonder if he can see my chest fluttering. "Of course. I just need to finish. I'll be there when I'm done." He stared for a moment longer, then returned to Hank's desk. Even though I was panicking, I continued pretending to talk on the phone. I even pretended to argue to prolong the conversation. Holding my breath, I watched as the handle turned softly and the door swung open. It was Al. I'd never felt such relief in my life. He turned to the mirror and put a finger to his mouth, gesturing for me to be quiet. The clone hadn't yet known he'd arrived. Al crept up behind his clone and grabbed him by the throat. The imposter resisted, but eventually succumbed to his brutal grip. He fell to the floor, lifeless, before crumbling to dust on the carpet. I ran to Al and thanked him. I also apologized profusely. "No need to apologize. This isn't the first thing that's come into the room, and I'm sure it won't be the last. I'm just glad you're okay." He smiled. "By the way, could you close the door? I wouldn't want another one of them coming in." "Of course." I walked to the door and then realized something. I'd left it unlocked after the doppelganger arrived. That's how Al got in. Remembering the last rule, I slowly pulled out my phone and opened the call log. My last call was at 10:18 p.m., 13 minutes after the deadline. I turned around and saw Al standing right behind me. "Al, what's the password?" He chuckled. "What's the password?" I ran out of there as fast as I could. The room still haunts my thoughts, but I'll never go back there. At least, I hope not.